5 minutes before I was supposed to marry the woman of my dreams, I learned the truth. Not from a fight, not from a confession, but from a whisper she didn't know I could hear. She called me her starter husband. And just like that, my wedding day turned into my wake-up call. I should have noticed it weeks ago, the way she looked through me more than at me, like I was a placeholder she was already planning to replace. But love makes you blind to red flags, especially when they're wrapped in white silk and promises of forever. The church was perfect. White roses everywhere, golden light streaming through stained glass windows, and 200 guests waiting for the ceremony to begin. I was adjusting my tie in the side room when I heard Lindsay's voice drift through the thin wall separating the bride's preparation room from mine. My fingers froze on the knot. The tie slipped through my hands. What I heard next would either destroy me or teach me exactly who I'd been planning to spend my life with. "God, I can't believe I'm actually doing this," Lindsay whispered to her maid of honor, Chelsea. My breath caught. Something in her tone, not excitement, not nervousness, resignation. "You're just nervous, Linz. It's normal," Chelsea replied. "No, you don't understand." Lindsay's voice was clearer now, like she'd moved closer to the wall. "Brandon's sweet and all, but he's my starter husband, you know?" The words hit me like a physical blow. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I was sure the entire church could hear it. "Starter husband? What do you mean?" Chelsea asked. "I mean, look at him. He's a mid-level accountant who thinks a nice dinner is Olive Garden. He drives a Honda Civic and gets excited about his 401k contributions. That's not the life I pictured for myself." Her laugh was sharp, cutting through my chest like broken glass. I pressed my back against the wall, my legs suddenly unsteady. 3 years. 3 years of believing I was building something real with someone who saw me as temporary. "But he's perfect for now," she continued, her voice taking on that calculating tone I'd heard when she talked about investments or career moves. "I can mold him, get him to pay for my master's degree, maybe push him towards something more ambitious. And if it doesn't work out..." She trailed off, but I could hear the shrug in her voice. If it doesn't work out, she'd move on to someone better. Someone worthy of the life she actually wanted. "Lindsay, that's..." "What? Practical? I'm 26, Chelsea. I can't waste my prime years on someone who'll never be more than ordinary. Brandon thinks he's getting his dream girl, but really he's just buying me time to find someone better." Someone better. The words echoed in my head as everything I thought I knew about our relationship crumbled around me. "But what if he finds out?" Chelsea's voice was barely audible. "He won't. Brandon's too trusting, too simple. He sees what he wants to see. Besides, by the time I'm ready to upgrade, I'll have my degree, some work experience, and I'll be set up perfectly for the next chapter." Upgrade. Like I was a phone or a car she'd outgrown. I stood there in my rented tuxedo, my hands shaking, as the woman I loved reduced our entire relationship to a business transaction. Every "I love you," every future plan, every moment of intimacy had been part of her strategy to use me as a stepping stone. If you've ever had someone you completely trusted reveal who they really are when they thought you weren't listening, hit subscribe. Because what I did next will show you exactly how to handle betrayal with dignity. The door to my room opened, and my best man Sean walked in. "Ready to do this, man?" I turned to face him, and something in my expression must have shown because his smile faded immediately. "Brandon, you look like you've seen a ghost." I had. The ghost of the man I'd been 5 minutes ago, the man who thought he was marrying someone who loved him. Just wedding nerves, I managed, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. But as the wedding march started playing and I heard the guests standing, I wasn't thinking about the vows I was supposed to make. I was thinking about the conversation I'd just overheard, and how someone who thought I was too simple to figure out their game had just made the biggest mistake of their life, because they were about to find out that simple doesn't mean stupid. And sometimes the most devastating revenge comes from giving someone exactly what they think they want. I straightened my tie with steady hands, looked at Sean, and smiled. "Actually," I said, "I'm ready to give my bride exactly the wedding she deserves." As I walked down the aisle, nodding at the guests who'd come to celebrate what they thought was the beginning of my happily ever after, My mind was rewriting 3 years of memories in real time. I'd met Lindsay at a friend's party. She was the kind of beautiful that made conversation stop when she walked by. Long blonde hair, perfect smile, and this way of making you feel like the only person in the room when she talked to you. When she'd given me her number, I'd stared at it for 10 minutes, convinced I'd misheard. "You're different," she'd told me on our third date, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "You're not trying to impress me with some fake persona. You're just real." Real. The word that had made me fall in love with her was the same word she'd used to dismiss me to Chelsea. Real meant ordinary. Real meant temporary. I'd thought I was the luckiest man alive. Here was this incredible woman who claimed to love my stability, who said she was tired of dating guys who were all flash and no substance. She'd curl up next to me on the couch and tell me how safe she felt, how she could finally relax with someone who wasn't playing games. But now I was remembering the other moments. How she'd started mentioning her friend Tara's husband's new BMW. How she'd begun dropping hints about wanting to go back to school for her master's degree. How she'd suggest I should be more ambitious with my career. "You're so smart, Brandon," she'd say, running her fingers through my hair while we watched TV. "You could be doing so much more than basic accounting. You should look into corporate finance, or maybe even go back for your MBA." I'd thought she was being supportive. Now I realized she was trying to upgrade me like software. Week 2 after our engagement, I'd sat in my car after work for 20 minutes, staring at the ring on her finger through our apartment window, wondering if I was enough for her. She'd seemed distant lately, distracted. Part of me had worried I was losing her interest. I'd been right, just not in the way I'd thought. Week 4, found myself researching whether other men had gone through this. Typed "wife doesn't respect husband" into Google at 2 a.m., then deleted it without hitting enter. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that I'd misunderstood somehow. Month 1. I'd found myself staring at our engagement photos on my phone during lunch breaks. We looked so happy, it made me wonder if she'd been acting even then, or if I'd just been convenient enough that she could convince herself it was love. The ring had cost me 4 months of salary. I'd saved for 2 years, cutting back on everything, driving my Civic, until it was practically held together with prayer and duct tape. I'd wanted to give her something that showed how serious I was about our future. When I'd proposed, she'd said yes immediately. But I remembered now how she'd examined the ring afterward, turning it in the light, asking casual questions about the clarity and setting. At the time, I'd thought she was just excited. Now I wondered if she'd been calculating its resale value for when she was done with me. We'd moved in together 6 months ago. I'd been the one to find the apartment, handle the lease, set up utilities. She'd been too busy with work to help with the logistics, but she'd had plenty of opinions about the place not being quite what she'd envisioned. "It's fine for now," she'd said, the same tone she'd used when talking about me to Chelsea. "We can upgrade later." Everything was temporary with her. The apartment, the car, the job. Me. Week 7. Stood in the shower for 20 minutes, letting the water run cold, wondering if this was what going insane felt like. The woman sleeping in my bed had married me while planning my replacement, and I was the only one who knew. I thought about the night I'd told her I loved her for the first time. We'd been watching a romantic movie she'd picked out, and she'd looked at me with those soft eyes and said, "I love you too, Brandon. You're going to make someone very happy someday." At the time, I'd thought it was sweet. Now I realized she'd been speaking literally. Someone. Not her. The bachelor party had been last weekend. Sean had planned something low-key because he knew I wasn't into the whole strip club scene. We'd gone to a sports bar, played pool, had a few beers. I'd spent the evening talking about how excited I was to be married, how I couldn't wait to start the next chapter. Meanwhile, Lindsay had been at her bachelorette party, probably talking to Chelsea about her starter husband and her timeline for finding someone better. As I reached the altar and saw her standing there in her white dress, radiant and perfect, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete clarity. For 3 years, I'd been grateful that someone like her could want someone like me. I'd spent so much energy trying to be worthy of her love that I'd never stopped to ask if her love was worthy of me. She smiled at me, that same smile that had made me fall for her in the first place. But now I saw it differently. Now I saw the calculation behind it, the way she was already thinking about the next phase of her plan. Hold up. If you think hearing that conversation was painful, wait until you see how I handled what came next. Subscribe, because the psychology here is about to get very real. I took my place at the altar, looked into the eyes of the woman who saw me as a placeholder, and prepared to give her exactly the wedding she deserved. Sometimes the best revenge is giving someone exactly what they think they want. The pastor began speaking about love being patient and kind, about two people joining their lives together in sacred union. I nodded at the appropriate moments, smiled when expected, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about strategy. I could have exploded right there in the church, could have turned to the congregation and announced what I'd just overheard, could have made a scene, embarrassed her in front of everyone, stormed out in righteous fury. But as I stood there looking at Lindsay in her perfect white dress, I realized something more powerful. Letting her think she'd won while I planned my exit would be far more devastating than any public outburst. I could have given her the dramatic confrontation she was probably expecting. Tears, accusations, demands for explanations. Instead, I did something that would hurt far more. I let her wonder exactly how much I knew and how long I'd known it. Do you, Brandon Kyle Matthews, take Lindsay Michelle Torres to be your lawfully wedded wife? The words hung in the air. 200 faces turned toward me, expectant. Lindsay's eyes were bright with tears that I now knew were probably more about the performance than the emotion. I do, I said. But even as I spoke the words, I was making a different kind of promise to myself. I was going to find out exactly who I'd married, and she was going to find out exactly who she'd underestimated. Do you, Lindsay Michelle Torres, take Brandon Kyle Matthews to be your lawfully wedded husband? She looked at me with those perfect eyes, the ones that had convinced me I was the luckiest man alive, and said, I do. The lie tasted sweet on her tongue, I was sure. The crowd erupted in applause. We kissed. Photos were taken. Rice was thrown. And through it all, I played my part perfectly. The happy groom, the man who'd just married the woman of his dreams. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is give someone exactly what they think they want. Hit subscribe, because what happened next will show you that patience and strategy always beat emotion and drama. But something fundamental had shifted in me. As I'd repeated those vows about loving and cherishing, for better or worse, I'd realized that the worst part had started before we'd even finished the ceremony. The reception was held at the country club downtown. As we walked into the hall, Lindsay's hand in mine, I started seeing things I'd missed before. How she immediately began cataloging details, the centerpieces, the lighting, the quality of the linens. How she made subtle comments about other weddings she'd been to that were more elegant or better organized. This is nice, she said, but her tone suggested it fell short of her standards. It's perfect, I replied. Everything we planned together. She squeezed my hand, but I felt the slight hesitation. Of course it is, baby. I just meant, well, next time we'll know what to do differently. Next time. She was already planning the wedding she'd have with her upgrade. During dinner, I watched her with new eyes. She was charming, gracious, everything a bride should be. But I noticed how she lingered in conversations with the men who had better jobs, bigger houses, more impressive titles. How she'd ask detailed questions about their work, their investments, their lifestyles. Brandon's in accounting, she'd say when introducing me to someone new, and I could hear the slight apology in her voice. But he's very stable, very dependable. Stable, dependable. The same words she'd used with Chelsea, but delivered to a room full of witnesses like they were consolation prizes. When we got home that night, she collapsed on the couch in her reception dress, scrolling through her phone, looking at photos people had already posted. It was a beautiful day, I said, sitting beside her. She murmured, not looking up. Did you see how many people were asking about my dress? I could probably sell it online for at least half what we paid. Why would you want to sell your wedding dress? She finally looked at me, and for a moment her mask slipped. Well, I mean, it's not like I'm going to need it again, right? The question hung between us. Right? Instead of answering, I got up and changed out of my tuxedo. When I came back, she was asleep on the couch, her phone still in her hand, the screen showing a text conversation with Chelsea that I couldn't quite read. But I didn't try to read it, because I'd learned something important about information. It was only valuable if you knew how to use it strategically. Over the next few weeks, I began to change. Not dramatically. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of a big confrontation or emotional outburst. Instead, I became quieter, more observant, less available emotionally. Every conversation became a chess move. When she'd fish for reassurance, I'd give just enough to keep her hoping, but never enough to feel secure. She'd trained me to chase her validation. Now she was learning what it felt like when that stopped. I stopped initiating conversations about our future. When she'd bring up her plans for graduate school, I'd nod and say something non-committal like, "That sounds interesting, honey." When she'd hint about wanting to move to a better apartment, I'd agree that our current place served its purpose. I started coming home later from work, not because I was avoiding her, but because I'd begun taking on additional projects. If she saw me as unambitious, maybe it was time to change that perception. For myself, not for her. "You're working a lot lately," she said one evening as I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. "Just trying to get ahead." I replied without looking up. "That's great, baby. I'm proud of you for finally taking initiative." Finally. The word was a small cut, but I developed thick skin. I stopped asking about her day in detail, stopped offering to cook dinner, stopped suggesting we watch movies together. I wasn't being cruel or cold. I was just present differently. When she talked, I listened, but I didn't engage with the enthusiasm she was used to. "Are you okay?" she asked one night as we lay in bed. "You seem distant lately." "I'm fine," I said, "just adjusting to married life." But I wasn't adjusting. I was planning. Planning how to reclaim my self-respect. Planning how to show her that the man she'd dismissed as too simple had been paying attention all along. I could see her starting to panic just slightly. The man who used to hang on her every word was slipping away, and she couldn't figure out why. But I knew exactly why. Because I'd finally heard her tell someone else exactly what she thought of me. And now it was her turn to wonder what I was thinking. The change in Lindsay was fascinating to watch, once you knew what to look for. The woman who'd taken my attention for granted was now working overtime to get it back, and her desperation was showing in ways she probably didn't even realize. It started small. She'd cook my favorite meals without being asked, meals she'd always been too busy to make before. She'd wear the perfume I'd complimented months ago. She'd suggest activities she'd never shown interest in before. Hiking, going to sports bars, even watching action movies she'd previously complained about being too violent. Week 6. I found her Googling "signs your husband is losing interest" on her laptop. She slammed it shut when I walked in, but not before I caught the headline, "10 warning signs your marriage is in trouble." Good. Let her wonder what I was thinking. "I thought we could try that new steakhouse downtown," she said one Thursday evening, scrolling through her phone with forced casualness. "You know, the one with the good reviews?" 6 months ago, she would have suggested the trendy Mediterranean place where her Instagram friends like to post photos. Now she was picking restaurants based on what she thought I'd want. "I'm fine with whatever," I said, not looking up from my laptop. "Or we could just stay in," she added quickly. "Order pizza, watch a movie, like we used to." Like we used to. As if our relationship had some golden period she was trying to recapture, instead of admitting that what we used to have was her treating me like a convenience. Week 8. She started leaving little love notes in my lunch, notes she'd never written before. "Thinking of you today. Can't wait to see you tonight. You're amazing." Desperate attempts to recapture something she'd never actually felt. Week 9. She started asking about my day with the intensity of an FBI interrogator. Where was I? Who did I talk to? What was I thinking about? The woman who'd ignored me for months was suddenly desperate to monitor every detail of my life. During dinner at the steakhouse, I could see her frustration growing. I answered her questions, made appropriate responses, but the enthusiasm she was used to getting from me was gone. I'd stopped being the eager puppy dog who was grateful for her attention. "You're different," she said finally, setting down her wine glass. "Ever since the wedding, you've been, I don't know, distant." "I'm not distant," I replied, cutting into my steak. "I'm just focused on work, on building our future." Our future. The words felt hollow in my mouth. But we're newlyweds. Shouldn't we be in the honeymoon phase? I looked at her across the table, this beautiful woman who'd married me while secretly planning to trade up, and felt nothing but cold clarity. "I think we're just settling into married life," I said. "Things change when you really get to know someone." The word change made her visibly uncomfortable. Change wasn't part of her plan. Her plan required me to stay exactly as I was, devoted, predictable, manageable, while she positioned herself for her next move. Week 10. I caught her crying while looking at wedding photos on her laptop. When I asked what was wrong, she said nothing, but I knew she was starting to realize that her safety net was disappearing. Week 11. Found her looking through my phone while I was in the shower. When I came out, she quickly pretended to be scrolling through her own. The trust was completely gone, but she was the one acting guilty. She started texting me more during the day. Random messages about missing me, thinking about me, looking forward to seeing me. It would have been sweet if it weren't so obviously calculated. "Miss you too," I'd reply. "See you tonight." Nothing that fed the narrative she was trying to rebuild. The real unraveling began when she realized that her usual tactics weren't working. One evening I came home to find her in tears on the couch, and this time the performance was Oscar-worthy. "What's wrong?" I asked, sitting beside her. I feel like I'm losing you," she said, her voice breaking perfectly. "Like you don't love me anymore." The trembling lip, the vulnerable eyes, the way she leaned into me seeking comfort. 6 months ago, it would have had me apologizing and reassuring her for hours. "Of course I love you," I said. "You're my wife. But you don't act like it anymore. You used to be so affectionate, so attentive. Now you come home and you barely seem to see me." She was right. I did see her. I saw her exactly for who she was. "I don't know what you want from me, Lindsay." "I want my husband back," she said, tears streaming down her face in a way that would have destroyed me a month ago. "I want the man I married." The irony was perfect. She wanted the man she'd married, the one who thought he was enough for her, who believed in their future together, who would have done anything to make her happy. That man was gone, and she'd killed him herself with words she'd thought I'd never hear. "I'm still here," I said, putting my arm around her. "I'm just trying to be the best husband I can be, more focused, more ambitious." "Isn't that what you want?" She looked at me strangely, probably wondering if I somehow knew about our wedding day conversation. "I never said you needed to change. Didn't you?" The question hung between us. She couldn't answer it honestly without admitting to conversations she'd had, thoughts she'd shared, plans she'd made. Sometimes watching someone realize they're losing something they never valued properly is its own form of justice. Subscribe, because what happened next will show you that actions always have consequences. She was about to learn that starter husbands could be replaced too. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening, 3 months after our wedding. I'd been working late again, and when I came home, Lindsay was waiting for me in the kitchen with a glass of wine and a look of desperation barely concealed behind determination. "We need to talk," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "Okay," I replied, setting down my briefcase with deliberate calm. "About what?" "About us. About what's been happening to our marriage." She took a sip of wine, gathering her courage. "Brandon, I feel like I'm living with a stranger. You've completely changed since the wedding, and I don't understand why." I looked at her, this woman who thought she was so clever, so good at managing me, and felt that strange peace settle over me again. "I haven't changed," I said, walking to the refrigerator and getting myself a beer. "I've just stopped pretending." The color drained from her face. "Pretending what?" I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, my movements calm and deliberate. I'd been planning this conversation for months. "That I don't know what you really think of me." Her wine glass trembled slightly in her hand. "What are you talking about?" "Your wedding day was interesting, Lindsay. Beautiful ceremony, great reception. The only problem was what I overheard before we walked down the aisle." I watched her face cycle through confusion, realization, and then pure panic. She set down her glass with a shaking hand. Brandon, Thin walls in that church, really thin walls between the bride's room and the groom's room. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. She opened her mouth several times, but no words came out. Your conversation with Chelsea was very enlightening, I continued, my voice steady as stone. Something about me being your starter husband? About how I'm too simple to figure out your game? About how you're just using me to pay for your master's degree while you look for someone better? When she said, I love you during what came next, something inside me broke. Not because I believed her, but because I realized how easily those words came to her when she needed something. It wasn't. I didn't mean, she stammered. Oh, you meant it. You meant every word. I took a sip of my beer, had to grip the bottle to keep my hands steady. 3 years of my life, and she was still trying to manage me. The question is, what do we do about it now? She started crying then, real tears this time, not the calculated ones she'd been using for months. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I said those things. I was just nervous and scared, and I wasn't thinking clearly. For 3 years? What? How long have you been planning this? How long have you seen me as your temporary solution? She couldn't answer because we both knew it hadn't been wedding day nerves. It had been the truth, finally spoken out loud when she thought it was safe. I love you, she said desperately. I know I said those awful things, but I do love you. These past few months, watching you pull away, I realized how much I need you, how much I want this marriage to work. Because I'm stable and dependable, because you're good to me, because you're kind and loyal and stupid enough to be grateful for scraps. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I never said you were stupid. You called me simple. You said I was too trusting to figure out your game. I leaned forward. But here's the thing, Lindsay. I did figure it out. I've been watching you for 3 months, and I've seen exactly who you are when you think no one's paying attention. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice breaking. I want you to understand something, I said, standing up slowly. For 3 years, I thought I wasn't good enough for you. I worked overtime to become worthy of someone who saw me as temporary. I apologized for taking up space in my own life. She reached for me, but I stepped back. But you know what I realized? I was never the problem. You were. You're the kind of person who marries someone while planning to replace them. You're the kind of person who can look someone in the eye and lie about loving them. That's not. I heard every word, Lindsay. Every laugh. You thought I was too simple to figure it out, but you made one mistake. I picked up my keys. You underestimated exactly how much self-respect I had left to lose. Brandon, please. You wanted a starter husband? Congratulations. You got one. And now you get to find out what it feels like when he graduates. 8 months later, I'm sitting in my new apartment, a 1-bedroom place downtown that's smaller than what Lindsay and I shared, but every square foot belongs to me. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks ago. She kept the wedding gifts, I kept my dignity, and we both got exactly what we deserved. The funny thing is, she was right about me being too simple to see what was happening. For 3 years, I'd been so grateful to have her that I'd ignored every red flag, every subtle insult, every sign that she saw me as a stepping stone rather than a destination. But she was wrong about one crucial thing. I wasn't too simple to learn. I got that promotion she'd been pushing me toward, but I did it for myself, not to become worthy of someone else's conditional love. The extra money goes into savings now, not into impressing a woman who was always looking for the next best thing. Lindsay tried to contact me several times after I moved out, texts about how she'd made a mistake, how she'd realized what she'd lost, how she wanted to try again. I never responded. Some conversations end the moment you overhear someone's real opinion of you. I heard through mutual friends that she's dating someone new, a lawyer with a BMW and a house in the suburbs. Good for her. I hope he makes her happy. I hope he never has to stand in a church preparation room and hear the woman he loves describe him as a placeholder. The ring sits in a drawer in my bedroom. I should probably sell it, but I keep it as a reminder. Not of her, but of the lesson she taught me about the difference between being loved and being useful. I'm dating again. but carefully. I listen now, really listen, to what people say when they think I'm not paying attention. I watch how they treat servers, how they talk about their exes, how they handle disappointment. I've learned that someone's character reveals itself in small moments, not grand gestures. There's a woman at work, Kayla, who brings me coffee sometimes when she gets one for herself. She's never asked about my income or my 5-year plan. She laughs at my jokes, even the bad ones, and when she talks about the future, it's about her own dreams, not how someone else might help her achieve them. Last week, she asked if I wanted to go to a baseball game with her. Not because she loves baseball, she admitted she doesn't know much about it, but because she'd noticed I have a team calendar on my desk and thought it might be fun to learn. I said yes. I'm not ready for anything serious yet. Maybe I won't be for a while, but I'm ready to be appreciated for who I am, instead of apologizing for who I'm not. Lindsay taught me something invaluable, that being someone's good enough for now is worse than being alone. She thought I was her starter husband, but really, she was my final lesson in never accepting less than I deserve. The ring in my drawer isn't a reminder of her. It's a reminder of the man I used to be, the one who was grateful for scraps instead of demanding the full meal. That man died in a church preparation room, and I'm better for it. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time. Subscribe if you know that self-respect isn't negotiable and that sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is finding out the truth before it's too late. I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm exactly who I was always meant to be. A man who knows his worth and refuses to settle for someone who doesn't see it. And that's not a start or anything. That's the finished product.